Okay, so good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do, except in the summer, on Monday afternoons to figure out what the future looks like for smarter buildings. So great to have you with us today. This is a brand new month, and every month we have a theme. And the theme of this month is buildings as assets, and all of the sort of implications of that brings. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. Really looking forward to this. Our agenda, normal sort of news and trends and chit chat at the beginning, and then we'll talk about buildings as assets and really sort of start this month by sort of asking the question, what are assets and why are they important in the context of buildings? And then we'll have a good discussion, and hopefully that will kick us off on all of this. But before we dive into that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Sinclair for an update from automatedbuildings.com.
Thanks, Anto. I'm glad we took August off because it seemed like it was an incredibly busy month for us. We got going on our AHR Expo 2025 education sessions, and we've been working on those and have now got them submitted off to AHR. So yeah, kept us busy. Didn't notice that we weren't in Monday Live. We basically kind of reorganized ourselves for these sessions. Last year we were toting our 25 years in the industry. This year we're talking about a new era and new voices, and the family has joined in to help us make that happen. I guess in retrospect, I should have had more kids if I'd known we were going to be so short of people. But well, we have to work with what we've got. So I've mustered everybody up, and earlier on, I asked you what I should do with automated buildings, and you said turn it over to my people. And at that point, I didn't have any people, but we've got a few people now. But we recognize that the fact the industry is going in many directions simultaneously, we definitely need new voices and stuff. So anyway, that's good. We have this innovation wheel, which I thought was kind of good, worth taking a look at. It's an actual LinkedIn post. We basically have the future of smarter buildings, staying hungry. That does a good job of summarizing where we were in July when we left. So it actually brings back a lot of the points that we were chatting about there. So if you want to kind of catch up as to what we were doing before we broke for August, that's there. We also, during this month, created some relationships with organizations such as Ashby and CGNA Controls Group of North America, just trying to get the importance of some of these organizations, because they do have a voice and they do carry our messages out as well. So it's important that we identify them. And I think they're good for people that are starting up. They have to understand how these organizations and how they all fit together, how ASHRI is kind of instrumental to everything, but it has its specialized areas such as BACnet. And yeah, so I think that's a worthwhile exercise. We have a new editor, a new voice, who gives us the 5 realities of digital buildings. So kind of a different spin using the word digital buildings. We've been using smart and smarter and intelligent and all those things. And maybe just back to the whole cold hard fact that it's digitalization that's occurring in these buildings. And the most recent thing that came across just came online late last night, and we do have the ability to kind of get some of our stuff online in a matter of hours. And so the unlocking of the future of building automation with smart building as a service. This kind of builds a little bit on IBB, so it's an interesting article. It does create a thought there, is to you know, how this might roll out in the future. And there's a lot of directions. A lot of cloud native folks are starting to put voice into automated buildings. So looking forward to what's going to roll out in this fall. And I think there's also a big focus on AHR as we start to lay out our sessions, which I'm quite pleased with the diversity we ended up with this year. So pleased to see how that goes. We should be able to tip that in the next few weeks as to what the programs are exactly. Back to you, Anto.
Yeah, that notion of digital buildings, I think it's really sort of interesting. I was chatting with Rick earlier about something similar, just sort of thinking about what we're doing as being the digitization of buildings that makes it smarter. I don't know what other people's thoughts are on that term, digital. That works for people?
It seems to be part of a bigger movement, like the smarter, the more energy efficient and stuff is all what we've been doing and we have our heads in. But there is this whole digitalization process that's occurring everywhere in the world. And as you touch the cloud native stuff that Rick has introduced us to, as you wind into that. And the other thing that I'm getting pushed is from the kids behind me. My kids are not kids anymore, but grew up in the digital age. And they're saying, why are you making such a big fuss out of this? This is happening everywhere. It's not just happening in our industry. And so that's an interesting, I think the digitalization tends to be a broader term, which maybe we should start thinking about using.
It's a little bit complicated because 40 years ago, we started talking about DDC, using the digital. And we may have been about 40 years ahead of the game.
Well, of course, I grew up in that industry, so it's, yeah, right. And was that radical a change? But I think the radical change is as significant now because we're actually moving. But there we moved from physical devices to electronic devices. Now we're moving from electronic devices to virtual devices, cloud native stuff. So I think it's a similar revolution. It's a similar time in the history of automation.
I like the word digital. There's this notion, the World Economic Forum came out with this concept of digital maturity in buildings. And they're like, in order to meet, our decarbonization goals, we need to have digital maturity, which means it's a measure of a building or portfolio's readiness to apply digital and AI capabilities to reduce carbon intensity and operational costs. And buildings that lack digital maturity, they went on to say, are on a path to becoming obsolete. So that they're actually, the buildings are going to, the business and the buildings are going to diminish in value unless people are willing to apply, become digitally mature and be willing to apply these technologies. So I think digital is like a great term.
Wow, that's always was my goal to grow up. Maybe I finally did grow up, be digitally mature.
Yeah.
Just took 40 years longer than you thought.
That's right.
Okay, moving on, the link board we put up here so that you can gain access to these slides, which are all on mondaylive.org. So if you want any of these links, head over there. Any other thoughts or news or any perspectives from anyone? Nothing interesting, no big ahas from all the thinking of over the summer months.
Well, I've got one. So somebody mentioned about being like service oriented. I mean, Ken, you were just talking about that. But yeah, for the first time, we're doing what we're calling optimization as a service. So we're not gonna charge our customers to connect up to their IT systems, and we're having pushback at one of our grocery customers. So we're just gonna go in and install these digital, modems and stuff, these cellular digital modems, and just take on that cost. And we're gonna actually provide the refrigeration tech remote access to their refrigeration systems for the first time, because their IT department it's been such a pain to do it. So we're just gonna unplug their refrigeration control system from their network and install our modems, and we're going to charge them as a monthly fee to provide the connectivity as well as our optimization service. So I think this is the first time we've ever done this. It's a 40 market supermarket chain, Northgate Gonzalez Markets in Southern California.
Is that something you do for a period of time to optimize it, or forever?
Hopefully forever, because yeah, we actually laughed when we were, it's like the facility director was like, Keith, I feel like we're in the back alley, or something, doing a deal or something. I'm like, well, the first hit is free, so I mean, but seriously, that we're just gonna provide this just like a cable company. Like you don't pay for the box. It's like, it's not your box. Never mind what that box does. It just comes as part of supporting service. If they cancel our monthly subscription, we'll just come pick up our boxes and be done with it.
Interesting. Well, you should keep us updated on how that goes over the next few months.
Yeah, well, I found out one additional quick thing. I found out that these new subscriptions and stuff that you do with these carriers like AT&T and T-Mobile, now for the same cost, let's say you're paying $50 a month per modem per month. Now they've got it where they actually include the modem with it for free. So you don't even need to buy for the same price. So we're looking at maybe not even buying these modems up front. It just comes with the service. So we're just riding our as a service on top of their as a service.
There's better IoT cellular services now too, which is bringing the cost down to do that kind of thing. We've been doing this since 2016, right? On and off, depending on the situation, up to and including a whole energy management system, and sometimes just parts and pieces.
Yeah.
Kind of depends on how much that upfront investment is for us. But the getting buildings like that connected is such an important part of what we're trying to do, and getting that data out of there. And sometimes the simplest, fastest, least expensive, least painful method of doing that is stick a cellular modem and air gap it away from everything else, right?
Absolutely, Tracy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know a lot of contractors who use cellular modems during the construction phase of new projects, so that they don't get caught waiting on the IT department to give them access to the system so they can do their job. So even if it means, in most cases, they disconnect the cellular modem afterwards when it does get connected to the IT department. But during the construction phase, it's a wonderful tool to use, and it's straightforward and easy.
Yeah. The one challenge sometimes, like Keith, you probably, well, maybe not. But if the system that you're putting the cell modem on is already a standalone island of automation, not currently connected to the IT infrastructure, you're good to go. Of course, the problem comes in when it's also connected to the IT infrastructure and you're just trying to get a separate portal out of there, which we've had to do a few times, and then you still have security concerns and so forth. But it does make it a little bit easier. And even during install, you kind of are in control of your own destiny when you're doing things that way. And the speed and everything and the price coming down has made it really viable to do that. So
guys,
Okay,
isn't there isn't there still a cybersecurity issue even if it's islanded?
Sure.
Yeah, it is. It's a different kind of one, right? Now they're less worried about you getting in and getting to other system data.
Exactly. Because
now it's just a matter of keeping your system secure at that point, right?
Okay.
And a lot of the services that Keith is talking about are VPN class kind of services that you can sign up for to begin with. So starting in a really strong place from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Right.
And then there's just a few other things that you got to kind of take care of too along the way.
Oh, good.
All
Sorry.
right,
Good point.
let's talk about assets, buildings as assets, as I am going to bring on Mike Bordenero. I think I did that right. Mike, you should be joining us. Maybe I didn't do that right. Again, there you go. So we've been talking about silos, and it just sort of occurred to me that this is actually a great sort of segue between what we were talking about before the summer and now. Because really, if you think of all of the silos we've been talking about and a lot of the things we've been talking about, that's really how typically an asset owner would see things. And I was going to use that as my hand over to Mike. Welcome to Monday Live. And maybe you can introduce yourself, especially your interesting history, because you were involved in buildings and then you kind of went somewhere else and then came here. That journey was interesting. So maybe you can share that and
Sure.
kick us off.
Mike Bordenaro. I'm currently the executive director of the Asset Leadership Network. I've come here by way of being a writer. I was a senior editor for building design and construction in the 80s and 90s, and have written, I was a Singapore correspondent for Electronic Business Asia, and came back to the US and realized that if I wrote about architecture technology, building technology, I'd always have something to write about, because every 18 months there's something new. And that got me to BIM before BIM was called BIM. And from that focus on building information modeling, I have met people from all over the world who are experts in building information management, is really what it should be. And those colleagues, one of those colleagues connected me to the Asset Leadership Network in 2013. And I understood that to achieve what I wanted to achieve with the visualization of information, I needed to get to the C-suite. I was trying to help colleagues. I believe Kimono Numa has been a guest here, and your audience might be familiar with him. He's kind of the Einstein of BIM as far as I'm concerned. And
He's in the audience as well, so behave yourself.
okay. And I kept bumping into the glass ceiling of the facility vice president, because what Kimon and other advanced BIM experts are doing changes the way you contract, changes the way you do accounting. The information is presented, it's different. It changes the way you schedule things. It changes the entire organization. And the vice president of facilities can't authorize changing the entire organization. So the C-suite is where those decisions are made. And asset management, which has existed since before the pyramids, but received a refreshment in 2014 when the ISO asset management standard came out, and people from more than 30 countries around the world agreed on best practices to follow in order to improve the management of any asset. And when you read through it, it's all common sense activities, but it's the first time they were all put together in one document. And Jack Dempsey, who introduced me to the Asset Leadership Network, has said, most organizations are doing 90%, 95% of everything in this best practice list, but they see the things that they're not doing, and just those few things are going to help them take their operations to the next level. And one of the things that I love about the asset management system standard from ISO is the last item, which is continual improvement. And now I start with that last item, And if an organization isn't interested in continual improvement, let's talk about football, those Bears. I'm from Chicago, whatever. But if you're not interested in continual improvement, I'm not going to waste my time talking with you about all of the things that are constantly coming out to help you improve. And I got to tell you, it was really fun listening to you talk about the nuts and bolts of some of the things that you're doing. I love getting your hands dirty with that. But what I've been involved with at the Asset Leadership Network is that C-suite directive that tells the facility manager, you have got to start sharing your information with others so we can advance this. And I think what's great about this group and its support of the Coalition for Smarter Buildings and the IBB is that you now have a product, not a concept, an actual product that's virtual or physical that connects the information from multiple systems to let them talk with each other and serve the owner in ways that have not been possible before. I really think there's a key breakthrough that's just about to happen. And of course, HVAC and automation and energy is a great place to start for an organization, but the same concepts that you're talking about apply to all aspects of the organization. But first things first, I love that you're focusing on HVAC systems and automation and energy.
So let's open it up for the group. How do we think of assets?
Well, and David Katz says when we add AI to this, it'll improve it more. So I mentioned Kimono Numa, and I've been privileged to work with Kimon on what he calls BIM storms, online brainstorms using building information models to workshop or demonstrate or give the proof of concept of new systems, new approaches, new ways of doing work. Because what we've come to understand is all the tools and processes work. We've got plenty of case studies. You all know the best practices that should be replicated across the world. And the issue is human behavior and getting people to start thinking differently so that they can improve what they want to do. And these BIM storms are now, or last year, we started having AI storms because we need to use the automation, the artificial intelligence to automate the way we do our processes and further bring additional benefits to owner organizations.
So, Mike, I think your organization, the Asset Leadership Network, right?
Yes.
ALN, yeah, is going to be new to most of the audience. Could you just briefly outline, are the chapters, the size of the organization, how long you've been around, what
Okay.
the sort of the mission of the organization is?
Very, very good. So the Asset Leadership Network was founded by the U.S. delegation to the ISO asset management standard. And the leaders knew that there needed to be an advocacy group to help socialize the concept of an asset management system. And so we were formed in 2013, and we are a trade association. Individuals do not join, organizations join, but we have many sole practitioner members, but it's their company that is the member, not the individual owner. And we I've stolen BASF slogan from back in the 70s. BASF, we don't make the products you use in your homes, we make the products better. So we do not want to be a big organization. We want to combine with organizations like the Coalition for Smarter Buildings to bring this concept of asset management to associations. So we've done work with Society of American Military Engineers, American Society of Civil Engineers, Government Finance Officers Association. That's a really, I didn't know about that group. That's a really important group. And other organizations to bring the message to them. And the impact we have is what we are impressed with. It's we consider that we hit way above our weight. And so the Department of Defense now has a facility asset director of facility asset management. And we started talking with them in 2016. But I feel personally satisfied. My father's a retired colonel, and to actually have impacted the Department of Defense establishing this position is a huge impact. And we hope that the federal activities trickle down into others. Does that give enough of a?
Yeah, no, that really helps. I think the other thing that when we talked to you last Wednesday, this ISO 55000 as the description of creating a standard around how to describe assets, and not just for buildings, but everything associated, right? It's much broader. I think, again, a lot of our audience is familiar with, ISO 9000 as a, just the group ISO itself. And I'd be curious as to just to having you maybe talk a little bit about in your mind, what's driving ISO 55000 to at all? Why is it becoming important? And where do you see, I think you told us the other day, it's already being looked at by government agencies, but it hasn't necessarily taken off that well in the private sector so far.
So we talk with the government agencies a lot, and we use them and highlight their successes because governments need to be transparent. Private companies don't necessarily want to be transparent because that is their competitive advantage, and they don't want to be talking about it. So we're not saying that it's not taking off in the private industry. I just don't want to beat my head against the wall to try to get Amazon to tell us how they do asset management, because they're not going to do that.
Is there, with manufacturers, they can and do advertise their products and their operation is ISO 9000 compliant. Is there that kind of thinking that's going on for the 55000 standard?
When I met with the head of the Army Corps of Engineers, I said, you can do asset management without getting certified. And he said, I want to be certified because I want to go to Congress and say, we are doing the best in the world. We're following world-class approaches to managing our assets. And so certification for governments is proof of your transparency and serving your constituents. And again, that's why we focus on the governments. And the thing that the asset, it's great that your members are familiar with ISO and the concept of a systematic approach to risk management or quality management or whatever type of management. So this just follows along in that vein. But ISO 55000 defined an asset as anything that gives value to an organization. That was kind of groundbreaking because the accountants had taken control of what assets were. And asset is something that has a depreciated value that adds to the bottom line, or something. No, that's not it. If you're a restaurant and you don't have chairs, no one's going to be able to sit down. Those are really important assets to you, and their depreciation doesn't matter whatsoever. So it put the definition of asset into the proper value stream. And I like what Ken was saying when he was starting off, because he was talking about new voices. And one of the tenets of this asset management system is involving all relevant stakeholders. And to me, that's just, of course, when I was with building design and construction, almost every story I wrote about a project started with, this project was successful because they involved all of the people early on in the project. And all of you know that if you get called in late in the project, how can we do the automation system for this building that's already, or how can we, do HVAC? Well, if you're not involved early, then you're drilling your duct work through structures and breaking down walls that don't need, you need to be involved early. So
Mike, could you've told me and others last week a number of your journeys with DoD and others in terms of opening their eyes in terms of a new way of thinking about that.
Yes.
Sort of some of the meetings. Could you walk us through that journey? Where the aha is? And
yeah, so I mentioned just a little bit ago that it's not the tools and processes, it's the human behavior issue, and that's really come together with me now, because as I first mentioned, the journey with BIM in the facilities world just kept dead ending because there wasn't somebody who was able to make a decision that impacted the entire organization. It's important because, as was being talked about, was the digitalization of the building. It's the information. We are in the information age, people. If if we had moved from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age and you were still using stone tools and weapons, you were out of luck. It was the bronze tools and weapons that were winning. Well, we are now in the information age, and human behavior is, I need to hold on to my information. This is an important resource for me, and I am at risk if anybody else has my information. So part of the journey was helping leaders understand that there are risks involved with waking up in the morning. There's always going to be risk, but managed risks can unleash incredible benefits. So we have established what we call executive briefings that allow us to go into an organization and give them an overview of what's going on around the world so that they can help decide what they're doing. So one organization that we were at had an operations director, and this is a big organization, billions of dollars of work. And they tried to set up an asset management system, and the director of operations said, I'm not doing anything with asset management. I control the assets. I've been running the assets, and this is it. He just thwarted the whole idea of improving the organization. And the CFO quit, the person who was driving it. So the new CFO saw one of the presentations that we had done at the Government Finance Officers Association and had us come in, talked to us, told us that they had this problem area of the operations director who didn't want to be a team player. And so we brought in our members and had a presentation that he had to attend, and we just hammered in on how the information age is a team age, and you've got to share information. It's no longer siloed. That information can flow across multiple departments and improve all of the departments. And we wore him down, and he agreed to help with an asset management policy. And then just earlier this year, that organization told us they proudly had established an asset management policy. So it's not the tools and processes. And one of the things from the earlier conversation we had last week was Jim Lee said, yeah, it's a 10-year sell cycle. And that's very frustrating, but it was reassuring, Jim. So thanks for that. I've been telling people that comment.
Oh, thank you. Mike, could you take us into a little more of the discussion we had on Wednesday? I brought up the idea that, one of the things we struggle with in our little silo is getting enough critical mass for the enterprise to care about at the C level. And you had some nice points about how in aggregate and as a team, these things can be brought together. But, if we can save 1%, or we can save 20% of energy, which is 1% of what an organization does, how can they care about that? That's the framing. And how can we, get into asset management in such a way that we can be relevant at the C-suite level?
So thanks for asking and reminding me about that conversation. And there's a lot of resonance in the building industry when I talk about the glass ceiling of the facility vice president. And what I saw immediately, an asset focused conversation does is allow that conversation to move up to the C-suite. And any organization can't improve the management of all their planes, trains, and automobiles all at one time. They've got to do pilots and do proof of concepts, because what we're doing is changing the culture. All of the information that your automation systems and your HVAC, I love the discussions about just going in and hooking in the information and getting it. All of that information dramatically changes the way organizations operate. And when you do a pilot for an automation system or HVAC or refrigeration systems, you prove the concept of sharing the information among multiple departments and showing a direct benefit to this cultural change. And that all of you brought this up. What is the security risk of having the cell information? Yeah, there's risk, but you also talked about how to address them. And then in a grocery store, like Keith mentioned, that information about the refrigeration, starts changing their bottom line numbers. And it's not just their numbers, it's the efficiency and effectiveness and satisfaction. And the workers are like, oh, it's right now. I don't got to worry about that. So you do that with the refrigerators. Now you start doing it with the lighting. Now you start doing it with the cash registers. Now you start doing it with the inventory systems. I saw a robot called Tally just moving itself through a grocery store, scanning the shelves, because nobody likes to do inventory. Now, what you're in a position to do, because everybody, every hospital, every building knows that the heating and cooling of the building affects the productivity of the most valuable people in the building. It's the workers. Now, we don't call people assets. We call the experience and knowledge of the people the asset, the intellectual knowledge, because we cannot call people assets. We got to get beyond that. We're still dealing with the implications of forcefully making people assets. We got to get beyond that. It's the knowledge and experience of those people that is the asset, the intangible property. Is there a specific story you want me to tell, Jim? Because I get going on these stories and they just come pouring out.
No, I think that just the key topic is, how do we get relevant in our silo by joining forces with others? That's the key, because
that's the pilot concept, right?
Yeah, right.
So the asset leadership network, and I've got a document that I need to circulate through my board to have established a memorandum of understanding with the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. And then we can go together and bring the IBB and talk about improvement of all their assets, and they got to start somewhere. So let's start with this IBB. So that's
What's
the way to do that with you.
one thing that's sort of interesting from what you're saying is I've typically thought of something like a pilot as being a process to prove a product or a technology. But you're saying something completely different. You're saying forget that. It's actually to demonstrate or change how the users use the technology or products. That's what you're focused on.
It's the culture. Yes.
That's the value of the pilot.
Absolutely. So take this grocery customer I'm talking about. You talk to any refrigeration head and they're going to say, don't melt the ice cream. Like that's the most important thing to these people. And if you do a little research, and I have, because my daughter actually used to own an ice cream shop. Okay. So I'm like an expert in ice cream. So most 90% of product loss is because it froze. Because you formed ice crystals in it, it de-emulsified. They're doing sub-zero temperatures. You know what the ice cream should be? It should be not 7 to 9 degrees. But you go into any of these typical things. Oh, I don't want to destroy any product. You know, most of your product is getting destroyed because you're destroying it because you're trying not to melt it. I mean, my son used to actually work at a Ralph's, and I'm like, Keith, how often did the ice cream melt and you have to throw it away? And he's like, Dad, what are you talking about? Like, that never happens. I'm like, well, what does happen? It's like, well, it forms ice crystals in it. They get home, they're pissed off, they come back, and they empty out the ice cream, the whole case, and then they have to give them a new box of ice cream, and hopefully that one's not destroyed with ice crystals in it. So you're exactly right, Mike. I mean, it's changing. So we're gonna destroy the conventional wisdom of grocery stores when we start applying AI to this stuff. Like you want product loss, you're not gonna have any more product loss if you're not trying to let the ice cream melt. We're not gonna over freeze it. How about that?
Yeah, that's great. And that combines with what Anto is saying and what I have taken 20 years. You know, I have a lot of sympathy for Ken, who's been at this for 40 years. But somebody asked me, Mike, when do you think this is going to actually succeed? And I said, 10 or 15 years after I'm dead. And they laughed, and we did work with them because they understood that, you know, while we talk about saving the world, we know that it's, you know, a long-term process. And the process is changing the culture to accept technology tools. Nobody likes the word change. Improve, they can go for, but never tell anyone they need to change or it's going to run into resistance. And one of my mentors, I've been at this long enough that a couple of my mentors have died, but one said, if you're running into a problem, make the problem bigger. And so, Anto, that's what this does, is say, do you want to take advantage of the evolution of human-made tools and related processes to improve your organization? And when they say yes, then you say, well, let's get started with something that's really important to you, ice cream. And so you use ice cream to change the entire organization, the way trucks operate, because the trucks have to now be at that. And what's related to the trucks? The trucks have to have the right oil and gas so that they don't break down on the road. And they're, you know, all of these things, by making the problem bigger, you can get in, because if you're just selling automation, you're going to get resistance.
So how do we, sitting in a silo effectively, in the HVAC controls and automation silo, how do we do that? What is the approach that we as a group and industry should do?
Yep. Rick?
We go up, and so we have to connect the dots, and that's what we're going to be doing with the Asset Leadership Network and the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, is try and connect the dots between owners, assets, life cycle, TXO, which is one of the key things that Coalition is working on, total X of ownership,
Okay.
and then the tools you use to effect TXO, and one of those key ones is the IBB, right? So we're going to be connecting the dots from, like I said, owners to assets to life cycle to TXO to IBB to the tools. I think we've been jumping too far from trying to say, hey, let's make the tools relevant to the owners without first establishing that assets and life cycle have to be understood as the key things that we're trying to affect. And if we're just talking about 20% of the $1 or the 20% of the $2 that's energy in a given month or a day or a year, that is peanuts. But if we're talking about 20% of the life cycle value of an asset, that is the building, that is the chairs, that is the ice cream, that's a much, much bigger number.
Well,
So
and to
connecting
Jim's
the
point-
dots is what we're going to do.
And to Jim's point earlier, like turning it around, it's actually energy is such a huge component. And the retailers just drive me nuts with this. You know, energy is only 1 to 5% of our spend, so we really don't care about it. Yeah, but you're only making 1 to 5% profit margin, dude. So if you improve your energy by 20%, it's huge. I remember I was at a retailer that sells coats, and it's freezing in there and it's snow on the outside. And I mean, maybe they're trying to sell some more coats. I don't know, but I mean, it's like, why aren't you adjusting your thermostat dynamically? It had the box over. It's like, oh no, the store manager was like, we never touched that. I'm like, but it's snow on the ground and it's 64 degrees in here. And I'm like, look at that register. Like, that's not air coming out of there. That's the 10 extra coats you have to sell this hour with your measly profit margin to make up for that over air conditioning. Like, it's not air. It's coats. It's
Keith,
whatever.
that is the connection to the organizational mission. That is a beautiful sell.
Well, and there are two really important things here, coming back around to try to address Jim's original question. How do we become relevant? One is relating it to the right view of that particular business, like Keith was talking about. But something that you said, Mike, I think is important. It's subtle, what you said, but really important. And that is becoming part of the overall cultural change towards better asset management and better cost control and so forth. So yeah, we're only one piece of that. But if you get an organization thinking in totality about touching all aspects of their assets and what's driving that, we get swept into that group that way, right? The net, this is net fishing a little bit. The net, captures us when we look at it this way.
Business value. That's what.
Yeah.
So we don't have to stand on our own and be an important, bottom line changing sort of an improvement necessarily if we're part of a larger movement to make all this happen.
And that addresses what Steve asked about the size of the Asset Leadership Network. And we don't want to be big. We want you to be big. And we just want to bring the subtle culture message to give validity to the message that you already have down. You have this message down, but being involved with the Asset Leadership Network helps you make the problem bigger to get above the facility vice president to the C-suite. So they can say, yes, we want to improve our organization with better information management systems, and we're going to start with HVAC and automation.
So Mike, how can we get into other thought processes and silos in the business? So for instance, insurance, right? If we're doing asset management, there's a lot of risk associated with the assets that we all run and manage. And how do we make it interesting? That's just one example, but how do we make this subject interesting to other silos? Or do we not do that and instead go to the C-suite and try to have them push it down?
I love this group. You guys just go straight to the heart of the matter with every question you have. So the Asset Leadership Network has ALN industry asset leadership boards. So we have the ALN Airport Asset Leadership Board. We bring that message to airports because we've got one message: improve the increase the benefits to your organization with a systematic approach to assets. But if we have pictures of trains, then the people in the plane industry aren't going to like it. They're going to, oh, that only works because that's human behavior, right? So we have established the ALN Insurance Asset Leadership Board, and we are working with insurance industry experts to try to figure out how to bring this to the insurance industry. Now, we are based in the US, but everything is global these days, right? You can't just be, there's no way to restrain your reach because the internet brings us everywhere. And we've got colleagues all over the world, and we do a quarterly program with our Australian colleagues at the Asset Management Council. And in Australia, which is 20 years ahead of the US in terms of asset management, they do have insurance that is reduced if you are certified to the ISO asset management system. Because if you got your shit together, it's not going to fall apart and their risk is reduced.
Right.
And if you're certified, then you are able to show you've got it down. Luckily, the first US federal certification is for the Library of Congress John Adams building, and the majority of the things that are being certified is their HVAC system. So join the ALN come November 13th to the Capitol Hill, where we're going to have an event that highlights that the Library of Congress, the architect of Capitol, which controls the Library of Congress, has done this. And they also have a director of facility enterprise asset management. And we started talking with them in 2016, and they got their first certification this year, 8 years on that one also. And I think the fact that it is mainly their HVAC systems that are certified is a real boon to your group and your industry to be able to be breaking down those walls.
Guys, I'm going to have to drop up at precisely at 4, but listening to all this, my reaction or thoughts are, from a building management perspective or building automation perspective, we're naturally inclined to look at how do I control a chiller, air handler, VAV box, whatever piece of equipment it is, right? It's very control oriented. And when I listen to what asset management is about, it's really about operation and process. And so the asset manager in the C-suite, he's looking at how do I operate my business, whatever that is, and what processes do I have or am I missing? And particularly from an information standpoint, I could do this process a whole lot better if I had access to better information, right? And so it feels like to me, our conversation needs to be one where we start thinking in those terms and we start offering advice to the C-suite around how the information that we naturally collect every day can facilitate a much better and richer process for managing their assets and not get balled up in, oh yeah, I control your chiller to 42 degrees. That's not relevant.
You can do that, and you will do that as a proof, but that's not what you're selling. You're selling the bigger picture.
You're selling the bigger picture.
So that's a great objective for us for this month, to figure out what exactly does that mean. I think that's great, but what does that mean? What should we do? How should we
go about doing it?
Yeah. In this
That's
group.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
You already are, by working to establish a BIM storm for ASHRAE 2025. We're in that mode. And part of that BIM storm lead up process will be a online workshop where this type of conversation is applied to virtual buildings that we pick. We've already got things, we've done things with Anto and Rick in the past, and we'll continue building on that to show this. And I really think we need to put an ice cream refrigerator into whatever building, because Keith's concept of, you know, that everyone, what, the ice cream froze? Oh no, we're going to get people's attention if
Right.
we make sure the cafeteria has the ice cream at the right temperature.
Ice cream storm.
An ice cream storm.
But again, we have connecting the dots between how BIM helps to save the ice cream. I think that's the isn't that it?
Mhm.
No.
And now going back to Jim's question about other silos that we attack, in addition to insurance, our governments are a really important one. I mentioned that we approach them because they have to be transparent, and they should be transparent about their successes with their savings, because one of our guest speakers, keynote speaker at the National Academies. We've been lucky enough to have a lot of events at the National Academy of Sciences on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. And Admiral Thad Allen was our keynote speaker once. He was the head of the Coast Guard, and he got a Presidential Medal of Honor because when people couldn't figure out how to do Katrina, FEMA failed, he came in and he was the one with the Coast Guard to actually help resolve the issues of getting people out and getting resources in. And then when the Deepwater Horizon spill occurred, he extended his service because he was supposed to retire that month, but he stayed and led the team that fixed that oil leak. And so he's a national hero. And he spoke and said, when he was being interviewed by senators to become the head of the Coast Guard, one of the senators, and he wouldn't name the senator, said, "What do you think about climate change?" And his response was, "I don't know anything about climate change. I just know that there is water where there used to not be water, and I'm in charge of it." And we are facing real issues. That's how you guys started talking. You know, the climate is changing, and therefore building automations is critical to continuation of human life. Now, I don't think we should elevate things that high, but I think all of you need to understand and believe that that is where we're at, and we need to bring that to our governments, because we can have those conversations with our governments. We are the government. I hate it when people say government ought to do this and that. Excuse me, in this country, we the people are the government, and if you want to do something, do it. So
I thought you were going to mention the quote that Thad Allen made about transparency and openness.
Oh, that was beautiful also. He said, "Transparency of information leads to self-correcting behavior." A very simple sentence that drills deep into the psyche of everybody. But if how you did something wrong is exposed, boy, are you going to act very quickly to correct that.
So with that, I think we need to wrap this. I think this has been great. We'll continue this conversation in September. Thanks, Mike, for being here and filling us in on
Thank you,
what
Mike.
it's all about.
Oh, thank you all. I look forward to other types of interactions, and appreciate being involved with this with this group that has a product to sell. I love it.
Right.
Okay, guys, we'll get the video up tomorrow. Otherwise, have a fantastic week this week, and we'll see you again next Monday.
Thanks.
See you all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.